from a German business perspective, Mr. David Lehmann. He is the chair of Economic Policy Committee of die Jungen Unternehmer from the Verband der Familienunternehmer. That is the association, the German association of family-owned businesses that make up actually quite a huge chunk of German business. Thank you so much for being here today, David Lehmann.
Thank you so much, Wolfgang. Good afternoon from Germany. I'm delighted to be here and to present a bit of the German perspective on the COVID-19 situation. So die jungen Unternehmer, maybe next slide. We can already go to the next slide actually. The Young Unternehmer is actually the young members chapter, which we define more generously as all members up to 40 years in the German Family Firm Association, which has roughly 6,000 members. The figure that we usually give is like we're representing 90% of companies, 91% of companies in Germany, which are 2.5 million as like studies say, and we roughly represent 60% of all jobs, 80% of all vocational training capacity in Germany. You know, Germany has this dual vocational training system where people do training on the job and go to a professional school in parallel. The association is very active, like in running events for members and connecting our members, but is also very active in lobbying on the German level and also on the European level with our partners from the other European countries. Our association was actually born through like in 49 to support a third-way market economy, social market economy in Germany, which basically marries like free market elements with certain social security elements. Exactly. So next slide, please. The situation in general in Germany is not extremely good either. We do see a lot of weakness in export, for example. We see a new record low in consumer confidence, the so-called Konsumentenbarometer. We have short-time work in almost industries, in almost all industries. I will later describe what short-time work exactly means. The hotspots for this is hospitality, automotive, aviation, and travel agencies. I think this is probably similar in most countries. The short-time work is actually, I think, like roughly 10 million people are now in this short-time work program that the government runs. The travel industry reports an existential threat with roughly 10 billion turnover lost. And we expect a rise in national debt from 60%, where we actually just now met the European Maastricht criteria again, and we expect now a rise from the national debt from 70 to 80%. It's a moving target because it's a relative figure to the GDP, and we don't exactly know how the GDP will develop. Next slide, please. But still, in comparison to other countries, Germany is coping relatively well with the crisis. And we have a couple of reasons why we believe this is the case. So politically, there was no total lockdown in Germany. In Germany, there is restaurants had been closed, retail shops had been closed, but there was not like a general lockdown of certain like, for example, manufacturing. There were only regulations being imposed that, like, for some parts made it impossible to continue to operate. But there were no, as Mr. Ortiz reported, no checkpoints on the streets. There was no curfews in Germany. We have the so-called Kontaktverbot, which means like the contact prohibition. You can only meet a certain number of people, and you have to keep distance on the street and so on. But you can move freely and also still run your small business. We also have the strength that we actually have 16 federal states in Germany, and the competence for these measures is actually with the federal states. So the ministers of the interior actually meet together with the national government and then negotiate all these measures and have a competition for the best solutions around this. There are some dynamics which can also be like, I would say, difficult. Some like federal states seem to have like the goal of being like some ministers of the interior had the goal of being the toughest ones or standing out in the crowd of minister of interiors. But in general, we think that it's like a good thing to have this idea competition in place. Regarding the healthcare system, Germany has one of the best healthcare systems worldwide, with like a lot of number of intensive care units. We still like stacked up the intensive care units, for example, in Berlin, in a trade exhibition hall. There was like an 8 hospital was set up. But we saw that actually the intensive care units are actually not full of patients. So the German healthcare system actually coped quite well with the number of patients that we had. We also have sufficient testing capacity, well endowed local healthcare authorities, which are actually organizing everything in the local communities. Then we do have a highly developed civil society, so there's a lot of negotiating and lobbying going on, and a good rule of law in Germany. And we did have a rather conservative fiscal policy, like the so-called Black Zero in recent years. So Germany didn't take any new debt, and which now gives Germany the opportunity to actually spend money on these issues in SMEs. Next slide, please. So what kind of programs does Germany offer for SMEs? There's the so-called short-time work program that I mentioned already, which basically means you can send your employees home, either to part-time or entirely, and they will, and you will receive 60 to 87% of the net wage from the government to give it to them. This is a big relief for many companies, right? So they don't have to continue to pay the wage, and still people will not be sent into unemployment. This has been actually increased during the crisis now, and is actually, I think, a well-established instrument that we already used in prior crises in Germany. Then we have liquidity aids, which are loans, and we have roughly 14 billion euro in loans given to SMEs in Germany. This goes through the state-owned development bank, which this goes actually to the house banks of the companies, but the state-owned development banks actually covers 80% to 100% of the risk, depending on the case. Then we have direct aids, which is actually interesting. So it's not a loan; it doesn't have to be paid back, and we have already like 12 billion euro in direct aid given to SMEs. There's a bit of a, I would say, mixed picture in terms of the federalism in Germany, as some federal states actually have more, I would say, better programs for SMEs, whereas like other federal states don't offer additional programs. But there is a national level program which at least gives for like micro companies, for example, 9,000 euros in aid directly, and it's a very easy process. There's not a lot of bureaucratic hurdles to it. Then there's a lot of tax relief going on, so like payments can be done later, like advance payments can be delayed, some enforcement is suspended, and also the obligation to file for insolvency in case your company would be insolvent right now is suspended. That's a bit of a difficult case, but I think we should go into depth too much there. Okay, next slide. So what do our members say? We did a survey as well with our members, and 66% of members reported a loss in turnover, which is actually, I mean, it's high, but it's not as high as in other countries. 60% means still like a third of our members still don't report a loss in their turnover. As we see, like many industries like pharmaceutical industries or medical equipment and so on, they actually they gain from the crisis. But I think that it's a reasonable, okay number. 45% of our members had to apply for short-term work. Additional 50% want to do so. The really problematic aspect is the liquidity, where like 1/3 of our members roughly says that they only have a remaining liquidity for about 8 weeks. Actually, 94%, 94% of our members report that they could restart the economic activities instantly. But like the further we wait, the lower this number gets. Next slide, please. So what are the current challenges in Germany? There is a narrative of, oh, we against the economy, like the rich should pay for the crises and these kind of things. And I think this is really counterproductive, as like the economy is not like a third party, but it's like this part, like a substantial part of our society, and we are all connected to this and get the benefits from the economy. So the fall back to socialist patterns and call for a strong state, the discussion around wealth taxation and further redistribution is, from our perspective, really like poison to this fragile situation. This is like especially coming from the more left-wing parties in Germany, and we see this really as a problem. Then we actually would wish that the policy would be a bit more creative in their solutions. Maybe Alexander can later jump onto this one, from like locking down industries like hotels, hospitality, and these kind of industry to like more like it's informed solutions where we like the companies can at least operate at a smaller scale to keep some of their liquidity. Then the repayment of loans. Any hotel room that hasn't been booked in the recent weeks will not be booked in the future, right? So these bookings are lost. This turnover is lost. We now give liquidity into these companies, but it might happen that we actually see a wave of delayed insolvencies, and this might be a problem. And we, I think, should discuss the modes of repayment for the loans that have been given to SMEs. Then we would actually wish that the policy would make quicker decisions. Like there was like a weekly a meeting of the so-called Corona cabinet, a set of ministers that decide on the further progress in the policy, and we actually think also that the ministers of labor and social affairs, as well as economic affairs and energy, should be like full members of the Corona cabinet. Then there's this topic of moratorium on burdens. We actually think that there should be no additional pressure on the economy in this situation right now. So there are discussions about the right for mobile work, corporate sanctions law, or increases in social welfare, and we do see this as really counterproductive in this situation. And we would actually wish more for like a stimulus package where we say, okay, how can we actually increase our economic competitiveness as Germany now that we had to face this crisis to have more growth in the future? I think that's it. Yeah, thank you so much.